The system is broken. Full stop. We're broken.
Rock this world!
I know you have a background in journalism. You seem to still have that kind of journalism mindset. I see you sharing very relevant and important things daily that I think people need to hear. How do you kind of stay up to date on what is going on politically, especially in Utah?
It's mostly just paying attention to the different sources of media that still exist. So by and large, the Salt Lake Tribune does a great job. Ben Winslow at Fox 13 does a great job, especially during the legislative session, of keeping you updated. But then also getting away from like state politics and more just local issues. The Herald Journal in Logan they're still trying to fight the good fight with the reduced resources that they have, and you hear a lot of things going on through local Facebook groups. There's Cache Valley 411, Logan 411, even in the like little town classified sections on Facebook, you'll see people talking about issues that are important. Like right now in the Nibley classifieds group, there's a bunch of people that are up in arms about a housing development that's being brought in, and everything that is being complained about or argued about does tie back to state policy. So everything that is happening local, as you start doing research and trying to understand issues, get pulled back to state law. So everything interconnects. And then the final is just following individuals who are creators or I think there's like lobbyists that put out content on TikTok. TikTok is where I get a lot of information. Brian Schott, who is an independent journalist, used to be with the Salt Lake Tribune. He does a phenomenal job of investigative journalism with the state government. Better Utah produces they produce a TikTok series called Hill Yeah. Every day a new video analyzing something at a deep level of what's happening at the state government level. So just consuming a lot of content, being discerning about what you're consuming, and just paying attention.
I noticed you said at the very beginning, media in Utah that still exists. I'm curious if you have thoughts on media consolidation in Utah, or just the state of the independent press.
I think that the journalism industry has just been, over the past 20 years, completely shattered by a mix of economic factors and changing tastes of the consumer, technology factors, and an ongoing assault in trust that happens is a function of both people externally criticizing the media, but also some instances of media outlets doing just a really poor job of what they do. So when we bring that down to a local level, like I look here in Cache County, and back when I worked at the Herald Journal, when you worked at the Herald Journal, we had a staff of 6 news reporters, an editor, and an intern. Let's call it 7.5 people dedicated just to getting news of what's happening in the communities in Cache County and Franklin County, Idaho. That's down to, I think, maybe 2 people right now. And I'll call it maybe 2.5. I don't know. But I just go by what I see on the bylines. When you get down to that level, there's nowhere near the ability to cover different areas. You get stretched a lot more thin. There's also less tenure of the individuals there. If we added up the total years of experience covering Cache Valley that existed back in like the 2000 to 2005 time period at the newspaper, it probably would have got up at least 30, 40 years, maybe even more than that, of total experience covering the Valley. And now it might be 3 or 4 years of total experience covering the Valley. So it's really helpful to have that context. And you see that in every community, everywhere in the country, that these local news sources that were deeply embedded and attending meetings and paying attention to what local officials were doing, holding them to account, that's all really just disappeared. And I think it's a huge source of the problems that we have experienced nationally, because there's no independent voice. There's no fourth estate out there cataloging in a reliable way what's happening with our government or just in our communities in general. And so it's a huge challenge. And like I said, part of it's economics. The newspapers were funded by classified ad sections and advertising, and Craigslist, and here in Utah, something like KSL came through and wiped that out because you could do it better for free online. And so they lost that. Then people wanted to consume their content online and not get a dead tree on their front porch every day. And so that was changing, but the newspapers, losing revenue, decided we need to put up a paywall to charge people for our content, and people don't want to pay for content online. It's just a death spiral, and gets us to this time where we don't have people providing good journalism in our communities. And it's it's not just a very sad thing, it's a very bad thing.
I agree. When I worked at the Herald Journal, and this was the fault of like no one in the newsroom. This was like, very top, like executive type decision making. I don't even think they were in the Valley, but just I felt like the newspaper was being cannibalized in a variety of different ways. Economically, I understood what they were trying to do. I'm very product centric myself as a content and like marketing person. I believe that if you don't have a good product, you don't have anything. What I saw them doing at the paper, like, reducing coverage, slashing it to like 3 days a week or things of that nature, just felt like they're eating themselves. Is there anything that people can do or citizens can do to preserve the Fourth Estate and help save independent press?
This is just my opinion, but there is a resurgence in a lot of areas of independent journalism. I mentioned Brian Schott earlier. He was no longer with the Salt Lake Tribune. He starts up his own outfit, and he's producing a Substack newsletter and TikTok videos and maybe other social platforms. Puts all the information out there for free, but does a fundraising model where people can subscribe. They can subscribe to the premium Substack. They can donate, different things like that. And that's how independent journalism by and large is getting funded these days. And so my first recommendation would be that for anyone who finds someone who's doing something like that in their community, throw a few bucks a month or whatever, $10, $20 a year their way, because it will help sustain that effort. It's in our collective interest to do more to encourage that, to encourage good independent journalism so that it doesn't completely die out. It's like really keeping the flame alive type thing. The other would be to help others understand the benefit of journalism in communities, of good quality journalism. And by that, I don't mean go around and go to your cocktail parties and sit there and bloviate about how great this individual piece of journalism or this journalist is, but share in your daily life. Like if you see impactful content, if you see a story that matters to you, share it on your social media channels, share it with people directly, send them text messages and be like, hey, did you see this? Share why it's important and help like start a discussion. That's when you think back to the glory days of newspapers, we would talk about putting a story on the front page that would be a talker, like something that people around town would be talking about. And we don't have that in a community sense anymore, where people are talking about it. We have it in the sense of people anonymously sniping online about stuff and throwing pot shots, but we don't have anything that's like creating and fostering a healthy discussion about news and goings on in the community. And the best place for us to start that, again, in my opinion, is with our friends and our family. Like share things that are impactful and ask, what do you think about this?
I love that. That's a great idea. I'm kind of curious what rural areas are like in Utah and how younger generations make an impact in those areas.
I would say the biggest by a large margin, in fact, being 99.95% of what could have the impact is showing up to vote. The voice of any individual demographic does not matter if they aren't showing up to vote. And I think in the 2024 elections, we saw Gen Z, we'll label it, show up a little bit more to vote. But historically, the youth vote there's been a lot of passion amongst young people. but a lot of passion in terms of rallies and making loud noise on social media and seeming like there's energy. But then when it comes time to show up to the ballot box, the rate at which the youth show up to vote has been lower than expected or lower than needed, and basically crushed by the boomer vote. That's, I think, started to turn a little bit in the 2024 election, and you could speculate as to a number of reasons why. Also, the boomer vote is dying out. But to the point about what can people in smaller rural communities do, it really, really starts by both getting out to vote, but also getting involved earlier in the process. That could mean that young people need to run for office, any office. It could be city council, it could be getting appointed to a planning commission or library board or school board or whatever it may be. If not running for office, then at least getting involved in the process of vetting candidates, asking questions, like just showing up. You can't ask to have influence, but then have never got involved in the stages that allow you to earn influence on the front end of the process. We have this mistaken notion in this country and in the state and just everywhere that we have a right to influence our politicians. And what we actually have a right for is to vote, to cast the vote. And we have to do our best to make sure that that vote is being spent in a wise way. But where our influence actually matters, this is my take, is on the front end before that vote. If we want to have someone who is going to behave in an elected position the way that is in line with our values, we need to make sure that that person that's aligned gets elected. And so often we don't put in that work. I'll say I'm as guilty of this as anyone else. We don't put in the lobbying, we don't put in the canvassing, we don't put in the knocking on doors to advocate for the candidate of our choice. And then when someone who we really don't like gets elected, we can call them up and we can say, hey, I don't like what you're doing. I don't like how you voted here. We can even start to get angry at them, but it doesn't matter because you're not part of their core constituency. So we have to build a new core constituency that in places outpowers the existing power core constituency.
So you said that Gen Z tends to vote at a lower rate than you would kind of expect with the amount of passion they put into rallies and online discourse. Why do they feel disconnected? Why do they vote at a lower rate? And in general, I guess, a lot of people do feel disconnected from government. They feel that voting is ineffective. They're frustrated, I think, in general by the two-party system and just the state of the world as it is. Is there anything that can help rebuild trust in the system, either on their end or on like our leaders' end?
I think the answer is no, honestly. The system is broken in the United States. Flat out, full stop, we're broken. And I think it might be a bit of a hot take to say this, but it can't be fixed unless like something big has to happen. Something drastic needs to happen to shake the system up, because the way that it's structured right now, the power imbalance is so heavily shifted towards the people who have interests other than what we would presume the interests of young people are. What I mean by that, I'll be explicitly clear, is the ultra rich have so much power in this country, and they have no interest in doing anything but preserving that the system's not going to change. We might get thrown little bones here or there that suggest that there's going to be an impact. Campaigns will throw out a youth policy coordinator to try and give a voice to younger generations, but it really never matters. And this is not a Republican versus Democrat thing either. The source of the problem, in my opinion, is the ultra wealthy. Both parties are out of touch and do not care about serving any audience but the wealthy. And that goes even triply so for the Democrats, who are so enshrined in a gerontocracy where anytime there's a youth movement or someone of below 40 who starts to get traction, there's so much infighting that against them that it hurts any momentum they can possibly have. I don't know what the answer is. I don't think there's an easy answer to fix it. And that's a sad and scary thing. 23 years, I've been waiting for the next shoe to drop where the next generation finally gets influence and finally gets to take control. And we finally get to start to address issues that matter to us and will matter to the future of this planet, like climate change, income inequality, housing shortages, the treatment of the most needy or most vulnerable among us. And it never happens. And it just seems like more power gets consolidated with the groups that are opposed to all of those things. So in a lot of ways, I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but it gets sad and scary.
On that happy note, let's talk about more sad things. Utah's supposed to be so family friendly. We see ourselves as a very family oriented state, family values. But when it comes to things like family leave, childcare, postpartum health, where would you say Utah ranks? How do families actually fare here? How are they supported?
Yeah, this is really interesting. There's reasons for hope that Utah can be different than the rest of this country. So, but then there's also reasons where sometimes you just throw up your arms and they're like, nothing's ever going to change. So if we look at family friendly policies, you're going to have debate. Just the minute you say family friendly policies, you're going to get into debate about what that actually means and what actually constitutes family friendly policies. But if we look at it just something that like paid family leave, paid parental leave, if we look at it, things like food stamps, being able to prepare for children's education, there's some things Utah has done, like provide a savings account structure for you to save for a kid's education. There are some things that happen on the state level to make sure that the most vulnerable children are taken care of, but not as much as we would like, especially if we look at paid leave. It ultimately comes down to who we're electing. It's interesting, Utah and the LDS culture are on the cusp of like having a policy shift of like Utah and LDS culture has historically for 60 years plus now voted very conservative in elections, but in ways other than on LGBTQ plus rights issues, the LDS church is actually quite liberal socially. And I'm waiting for that to translate to a bunch of people waking up and saying, whoa, these candidates we keep electing are not operating in the interests of our families and our future and our ability to have a quality life in the state in the future going forward. And so I keep thinking that there's going to be a day soon where the members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are essentially going to become woke, as we would say. LDS women are politically pretty active, and they are pretty, at worst, centrist on a political scale. There are some just real wonderful LDS women out there who they take a stance and they're like, we can do better as a state. Why we don't have to suck as a state and as a culture. And those are the types of people that I think will eventually save us. The challenge that we have is their husbands. I don't see where LDS men, echoing national patterns of men, are getting brought along for the ride into reality. So that translates, when we think about who we're electing, we're largely electing LDS men into the legislature. There are some women here and there. There are not a lot of young women. I don't have the stats directly in front of me, but they're especially young Republican women in the Utah legislature. So it is a lot of men and very incestuous in terms of they're all lawyers or developers. So they're not coming from diverse backgrounds, and they're pretty much all white men. We are holistically as a state electing a bunch of cookie cutter, ultra conservative, LDS white Republican men candidates to make policy for the state. And that's what creates the super majority that there's just no room for negotiation. There's hardly any debate on issues. It's nothing moves. I think that Utah could demand more. I think that it's close, where if we could get one election where we could just pull everyone together, the Latino community, the more liberal LDS women, if we could build a coalition of a lot of people and just say, we don't need to bring this far left. We just need to get rid of some of the insane people in Utah government, like Trevor Lee, like Dan McKay. If we can get rid of some people who are spineless and just refuse to ever stand up against, like, there are people who know better, but they go along with the flow of the party for whatever reason, because they lack spines. If we could get rid of some of those people, if we can just eliminate a super majority, there is some good national help coming to assist with that. Just in the last week, the lobbyist arm of Pod Save America, Vote Save America, injected, I think, $20,000, which isn't a huge amount of money, but it's something. And they're targeting 10 races in Utah to try and flip them from Republican to Democrat in the upcoming legislative election. So there's like 3 senators and 7 members of the House of Representatives that they're targeting. And I believe Better Utah is the organization they're working with to deploy that all locally. But we need to just like pull together a coalition that is focused around moderating Utah values. So we're still Utah values, because Utah values is a thing. We're not trying to make abortions free on every street corner and do free transgender surgeries everywhere, because that's what the right will tell you. That's what guys like Phil Lyman will try and tell everyone. We're just trying to do some common sense things that everyone supports and create an environment where there can be a little bit more debate, healthy debate around these topics inside our governing body. And if we can pull a coalition together that just helps us get over that, helps us get below 66% of the governing bodies being Republican, the state, I think, would get a lot more healthy.
I want to touch on a couple things there. The first is, I kind of want to relate my own story of hope. You brought up like the LDS women block. I've had a fraught relationship with my family in the past. We're on very good terms now. I always got the sense that they voted pretty conservatively, definitely always voting Republican. And I don't know for sure if that's the case, especially for my mom, but that's kind of the sense I got. And as we have moved into 2016 and now 2024, so I'm currently unemployed for the first time in like ever, honestly, really. This is the longest I've ever been unemployed. My brother is unemployed. He had to move back home. My sister is unemployed right now. She had to move back home. I hope I don't have to move back home. We're in this place, you know, what they say, the F around and find out phase. And I feel like that is happening. I don't know if I'm imagining it, but my mom has been involved in protests for the first time that I can ever recall seeing. She came to the No Kings protest that we put on, and then she came to like 1 or 2 others. Like, she's starting to get out there, and I can't help but wonder if my parents, our parents' generation, if they're kind of looking at the state of things and being like, what did we do? We need to like reverse this. We need to start doing something differently. So and I'm not necessarily saying, you know, let's vote Democrat or anything. I have a lot of issues with the Democratic Party myself, but I hope that they are really looking at the candidates beyond like a party ticket. You were talking about all these extremists and people who just kind of are capitulating to them. When Cox first broke on the scene, I really appreciated and liked the guy. I think I may have even voted for him in one of the first primaries. I thought he was a very level-headed, reasonable person. I don't know if it's just my imagination, but I get the sense that he has moved significantly farther to the right over the years, away from center. And I'm kind of curious your thoughts onto if I am imagining it, and if I'm not, why he's doing that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I empathize with your situation and your brothers and sisters as well. And a lot of people are out of work right now, and it's a challenging environment to be in. So I wish you well on that. And I do think that seeing that impact, that will help hundreds of thousands of parents around the country see what's going on here. It's not just, hey, Casey, go pull yourself up by your bootstraps anymore. There's something institutionally wrong here. So I'm sorry about that. So Spencer Cox, he definitely came out feeling like a breath of fresh air. He was the lieutenant governor of Gary Herbert, if we remember. When Gary Herbert says he's not running for re-election anymore, then Spencer Cox becomes the natural successor to that. And in his initial run, Spencer Cox seemed like he was pretty centrist, was pretty open. He captivated a lot of people. And the single event that I think gained him the most mileage in terms of seeming like he was someone who could be a bridge building candidate was when the Pulse nightclub shooting happened in Orlando. And he came out with an extremely empathetic response to that in terms of saying there are gay and lesbian people and transgender children in our state, and they see this and it's hurtful. In hindsight, looking back, I am very, very skeptical on matters related to Spencer Cox. I think it was a politically calculated move. So in one regard, I think that everything Spencer Cox has been calculated, but he has moved further right as a permission structure for him to be able to do so, and him seeing that that's the path to more influence and more power. In the case of Spencer Cox, there's a very low ceiling on what his power can actually be, because he has been more or less, I'm going to use the word cucked by the legislature. He just kind of sits there and signs their bills, and he can't veto anything because he doesn't actually have any power in the state. But he's now in a state of preserving his power. So my two big incidences with Spencer Cox, it was after the election. There was something with Jason Chaffetz, and I wrote a letter that was saying, hey, Spencer Cox, you have seemed to be someone who's very open, very centrist, very much with we need to be more human in our moment here in this political moment in our country. Can you rein in? Can you at least have a conversation? I know you don't have power over Jason Chaffetz as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, but he is a member of the delegation representing our state. Can you reach out to him and just say, hey, can you chill a little bit? It is something around Jason Chaffetz and Hillary Clinton. I can't remember what it was exactly. But the response from Spencer Cox was basically like, hey, great idea. We'll look into it. And then this is nothing that he did or didn't do, but I really, really felt somewhere along the line that if Spencer Cox truly was a centrist, he had a unique opportunity to capture national momentum if he would have abandoned the Republican Party and went independent. Kind of the same motion that Evan McMullen made, but just doing it more naturally, saying, this is my values, this is the values of Utah. We are not aligned with the kind of where the Republican Party is going. If he would have done that and just said, I'm going to be an independent, he could have made legitimate national impact. And he didn't do that. He had no inclination to do that. He just sought the greed and the grift of what comes with being a loyal card-carrying member of the Republican Party. I think that that's really hurt him. He won't go down as a respected governor. He's not respected by people on the left. He's not respected by people on the right. Frankly, I don't know how he got elected again last time, but it's just a wild situation. But yes, to say it, when I say spineless, he's one of the key people. He's on the Mount Rushmore of lacking a spine in Utah government.
I can't imagine him winning again if he ran, like, because you're right. Like, I don't even know if he'd win in a primary.
Well, he had a fierce primary challenge from Phil Lyman in this last election, and they're still crowing about that he didn't get the actual signatures. That's all phooey. Of all the things wrong with Spencer Cox, he is not an illegally elected governor. He was a rightfully elected governor, but he had a fierce primary challenge. And then we even saw that thing where Phil Lyman and Brian King, the Democrat candidate, they teamed up in ads against him. Like they did the TV ads together, and like this far right guy and this Democrat are just saying, don't vote for Spencer Cox. That was pretty wild to see. All these guys who are wild on the U.S. House of Representatives stage, they burn like a firework. They burn bright, but they burn out fast. They could come back and try and seek it. So someone like a Burgess Owens, I could see him running for governor because he's going to run out of nonsense to say on the national stage. And certainly no one is listening to Burgess Owens on the national stage right now. And once he figures that out, then his next step might be to say, well, let me make a run for Utah governor.
Wild. Um, I want to kind of switch gears to, man, there's so many things I want to discuss. Since we're kind of on the topic of far right extremism, crazy things, I want to talk about ICE. So I know you've talked a little about ICE Block is the app. I'm curious what apps, what infrastructure, what tools are out there to help people prevent encounters with ICE or like protect people from ICE. What can Utah residents do to protect their communities from an American Gestapo?
Yeah, it's super scary, Casey. And you brought up the Ice Block app. That's an iOS app that if you see ICE in your community, you can flag it. You can like basically go into the app and say, hey, they are by the grocery store. And anyone else who has the app and within their certain area will get alerted that says that ICE is there. And presumably that the benefit of that is that if we have vulnerable members of the community that have that app installed, they can know where to avoid or kind of where to get away from at any given moment. I assume there's versions for Android and different systems. I think it's a useful tool that we have at our disposal to help out. Taking it more broadly, though, I think that there's a comfort element that we can do if we see ICE in our communities. And I haven't seen or heard of them being deployed in Cache County. They certainly have been deployed down in the Salt Lake Valley and Ogden and other areas. But if I see a member of ICE, and I'm not saying everyone's going to do this, I'm going to harass them. I am going to call them cowards. I'm going to call them out for covering their faces and being unidentified, and I'm going to make a scene. Because I have the privilege to be able to do that. And at some point down the road, they'll probably start arresting people like me for doing that. There's a deep hole we can go down in that road. But there's an element to make a scene and show other members of the community, especially the vulnerable members who might be seeing that there's people in their corner that are standing up for them. That's one side. The other side, which may be more important, is right now in Cache County, the ship has already sailed in other areas of the state, but local law enforcement agencies are being enlisted to partner up with ICE to kind of basically do their dirty work for them. And some of the local law enforcement agencies will couch it as, oh, well, there's just different tiers and we're just going to help them. We're just going to follow their policies. And if they need to put someone in our jail, we're going to do that. And to me, it's like you shouldn't be partnering with them at all. Like if you truly stand up for the Constitution, if you truly stand up for American values, you should tell ICE to kick rocks. And so we have a really interesting situation here in Cache County where the Cache County Sheriff's Office is in active negotiations to contract with ICE to work with them. There's actually a Reddit Ask Me Anything with Mark Anderson, one of the candidates for mayor in Logan, and someone asked him about ICE. And he broke the news that Logan City's police chief has said they will not cooperate with ICE with anything other than what's mandated federally by law. Mark said, I support that. And I was just like, hell yeah.
I saw your post about that, like right after I finished talking to Alana Nafziger, who's also running for Logan Mayor and who also opposes any sort of relationship between like the city or agencies with ICE. But I was like, dang, I wish I had known this like 10 minutes earlier. So I'm really happy to hear that at least two, hopefully all of our candidates for mayor are deeply opposed. I don't know if it's just because I am so disillusioned or skeptical of law enforcement agencies, but I was honestly surprised to hear that, and I am really happy to hear that. I think that's awesome. If I had the money, I might send the Logan Police Chief a fruit basket or something.
Cops nationally are a problem. Their qualified immunity is a problem, and there's a number of bad apples who spoiled the whole bushel, but I've known members of the Logan City Police Department for 20 plus years now, and they're by and large an extremely professional agency, and I think that taxpayers of Logan should be happy with what they have. People who live in Logan should just by and large be happy with what they have. It's kind of an island in everything that's going on in the world. But yeah, I was happy to see that, and it goes back to earlier talking about vetting candidates. People should get out to meet the candidate forums and raise it as an issue. Ask the question that's important to you. Say, will you support ICE? It's great that the candidates, Nafziger and Anderson, are at least two, but if someone else says, yeah, I think that they're fulfilling a good mission, then you got to say, you'll never get my vote. Just be loud and obnoxious. I'm not saying you have to go and start a fire. You don't need to commit crimes, but you got to make some noise and make people uncomfortable. There's a difference between having opinions on like what color we should paint the streetlights. That's an opinion. Whether or not we should grant basic human dignities and follow the Constitution and give equal rights to everyone in the country, that's not an opinion. That's a existential matter.
Yeah, I honestly look at things. I don't know how we got to where we are. I mean, I guess in some ways we've always been like this, truthfully. I do feel like we've taken some major steps backwards recently. I like to believe they're death rattles. I hope they are. I totally get it, like, fiscal policy. Maybe some people are more fiscally conservative or more spend friendly. That's fine to have a debate about. I think that makes sense. And it's good to have a debate about stuff like that. But people being people, I don't know how you can look at someone and be like, that's not a person. They don't deserve the same things as me. I wish it was easier to teach empathy, I guess. I think empathy would solve all these problems, but it's not something you can just distribute through the air or anything like that. That kind of stuff takes actual relationships, building relationships with people different from you. And of course, we're more isolated than ever, and in echo chambers more than ever, partly due to social media, identity politics, political design. I feel like the solution to that is you need to be building relationships with these people, de-escalating them, but that's hard. And, for some people, it's outright dangerous. So I do think that people like me, like you, who kind of have some of these privileges, do need to be trying to make more inroads and whatever we can do. So it's scary, though, I do have to say. I'm kind of interested in your thoughts on just data privacy, AI, tech industry.
I'm right in the thick of both AI and data privacy. It's issues for the people I'm selling to. The software I sell uses AI. It has to comply with privacy laws in Europe and certainly in the US, but Europe has much more stringent privacy regulations. Let's look at data privacy. Super critical issue and a scary issue that I don't think anyone has quite a handle over where we're at and what's going on. So for people overshare way too much online. That's not what I'm talking about. Like sharing way too much. The problem we have right now is we have enabled the government to, and I really don't want this to sound like I'm getting into conspiracy theories here, but we allow them to have access to everything. And the tech companies that we use every day, Google, TikTok, Meta, the government has a fire hose to all of that information. And that is just hundreds and hundreds of trillions of bits of data that are being sucked up every day. Some people will say, I'm not doing anything wrong, so why would they care about me? It's easy to just drop it at that and be like, oh yeah, no big deal. The challenge is if they don't need it to do anything, then why are they collecting it? And right now, the U.S. government has partnered with a Palantir. So there's this billionaire, his name's Peter Thiel. He's actually a really like weird, scary, he's kind of like a supervillain type guy. He's been in these interviews and they basically ask him, do you want the human race to survive? And he like hesitates on that. He's in this Elon Musk group of crazies that believes the human conscious can be embedded in technology and we don't have to live on this planet. Anyway, the U.S. government is partnering with Palantir to build a database that catalogs everything on every American. Where do you go? What do you buy? What do you email about? Like all of that kind of stuff. And it's just scary. There's no right to privacy in this country. That will be very interesting to see how it plays out because when it comes to data, it's hard to have geographical borders. And in Europe, they have taken an extremely opposite tact where you as an individual have ultimate right to what happens with your data. And they have sued companies like Google for billions of dollars for violating those rights. And so it's going to be interesting to see that all come to a head. There's a chance that the next war or the next world war could be over data. It's going to be over data or water or clean air, one of those things, maybe all of them. Incidentally, it all goes back to all of this stuff that we're doing with data collection and getting into AI is actually like, let's get aside from our civil rights cost that comes as a result of it, a civil rights cost we maybe don't know about. What we do know about that's a cost to us as humans is something like water and environmental impacts. So these data centers are using hundreds of millions of gallons of water a year. I just was reading a report that in Texas, AI by 2030, AI data centers in Texas will consume 7% of the state's water on an annual basis. I just also saw a brief documentary on a Bitcoin mining facility in Texas that just got built, and it's loud. It's like 90 decibels or more of noise every day, 24/7. And the neighbors are like getting physically ill being next to this and being exposed to it. Texas is the prototype of this, but it's being deployed across the whole country. It's like, let's just build whatever, wherever, it doesn't matter. Like, it's the future. We have to support building all of this tech infrastructure. And so just like, oh, we can't say no to it. Why would we say no to it? We'll lose to China. And that may or may not be true, but it's scary, and it's like it's a steamrolling thing, and it's another one of those I don't have an answer to. So AI is the other boogeyman. A lot of people say AI is coming to take jobs. The answer to that is probably yes, but just like everything else, every new technology that's came along, the vehicle, the computer, the internet, the cell phone, like everything has been a threat to take jobs or change things. It will take jobs, but it will also create new jobs. Society has to adapt to that. And I think in this case, it's just happening a bit faster, where some stuff is going to get wiped out sooner rather than later. And so my view on AI is, especially AI as we know it right now, like large language models and Gen AI and being able to facilitate decisions, it is misused by the general public. People don't know how to use it properly. It's abused by people in our education system, and that concerns me. By that I mean like students who are using it to outsource their schoolwork for them. So we're raising a generation of illiterates who are dependent on AI. It has made our financial system, our markets unreliable, because every AI company that's like a wrapper around a ChatGPT app is getting a $500 billion valuation. It's just not possible for all of these AI startups to be mega successful and change the world. It's the wild, wild west, and we're letting it all be out of control. The benefits of like being able to get answers, if they are reliable answers, quicker, and being able to automate certain tasks and make our jobs easier and those types of things, there's a lot of net benefits to it. In my day-to-day job, I sell those benefits to marketers, but we're not handling the whole thing properly. As a society, it's just kind of like we've dropped this transformative technology into the world, and we're letting everyone kind of figure it out for themselves. And we're letting the markets figure it out and all of that. That's creating a lot of negative effects at the low level, and goes back to the super rich people. They are going to make out like bandits in the whole thing. If we don't assert ourselves at the lower level, we'll get ran over.
I had one final question for you, just because I wanted to clarify. You mentioned these centers that are consuming just bucket loads of water. Are those AI specific data centers, or are those just data centers for tech hubs in general?
One leads to the other. So the big data centers that we have in Utah are for Meta, Google, and then the NSA, the National Security Agency. And those, as far as I understand, are primarily to store data, but anything artificial intelligence processing is just going to sit right on top of that. So I don't differentiate between the two in terms of what's consuming our water and what's creating an impact in our community, what is taking up millions of square feet of space, but they only need to hire 30 people to run the thing. I'm curious if you have a differentiation just in terms of the environmental impacts.
I've heard People say like AI is far more resource intensive than other technologies, but I've also heard people kind of refute that. I'm not sure myself. I don't necessarily differentiate them in my mind unless it's like verifiable. Like if AI is truly more resource intensive, that does give me pause. One of the reasons I kind of ask that is because I use AI very extensively in my day-to-day work and even just my day-to-day life at this point. As a marketer, I don't know if this is just comforting my own guilty conscience, but I tell myself, kind of like what you were saying earlier, you know, we're going to lose to China. This is the way of the world. Marketers are using AI now. A single person's expected to kind of have the output of a whole team at this point. And if I want to continue making a living, I need to adapt. I need to use these tools. I need to be able to increase my own output. But if AI is truly like more resource intensive, I wrestle with that.
Yeah, it's we're caught between a rock and a hard place in terms of our position in this world. To be completely like transparent, all of these issues, especially like how does this impact climate change in the future? Like this is why I never want to have kids. I do not want to have kids that have to. I think that the world right now is not great, and I think that it's going to exponentially get worse. We look at things like the island of Tuvalu, 250,000 people live there. The island is going underwater. In the next 25 years, they have their plan to migrate their entire population to Australia, and they're cataloging everything in the metaverse. So like every house, every property, everything on their island, they're like preserving the island they have in virtual reality because the entire population is migrating to Australia. And I'm like, that's the canary in the coal mine. This is going to happen in a lot of places. It's a scary world, and you're exactly right. It's like, do I put my future career opportunities at risk and become someone who's anti-technology? Do I be a Luddite and ignore all of this and do what I think's right for the environment? Or do I give myself a fighting chance and try to use things responsibly? The logical thing is to use it responsibly and use it well. Like, use it for enhancing your job and your life, but don't go out and sit all night generating pictures that steal other people's art of what you look like as a anime cartoon. Like, don't do that. Like, that's where I'm at right now.
I do have some very important rules when it comes to AI. I don't like to use it for brainstorming, except maybe to bounce ideas off of. I don't want it to like think for me. I want it to facilitate my thinking, maybe help me see angles that I'm missing, but I get very nervous about just telling it to do something for me, especially in a creative aspect. There were those studies that were showing like extensive use of AI was like tanking critical thinking. I don't know if that's overblown, but I do think it is a legitimate concern. I do think it should definitely be studied more, which I hope it will be, because the experiment only used like a sample size of 8 or something. So very, very small sample size, but the results are very concerning nonetheless. Do you have any final thoughts?
Fun conversations. It feels like everything is doom and gloom. It's like ultimately, I hope there's a way that things can get fixed. I hope that we're not all just mailing it in. If we all just quit, if we all just give up, then we'll get steamrolled as a society. Right now, this is the time to show up and fight if you want a future to be different. If you get worn down by things feeling bad right now, for me, the motivation is it could get worse tomorrow. So might as well do something to try and change it now. But everyone's got to find their own motivation and step up. But it's good conversations like this that I hope can help get things going. So I appreciate you initiating this today.
Likewise. I was going to say this when you were talking about kids in the future. Men, get a vasectomy. It's the easiest thing. It just is a weight off your shoulders, in my opinion. If you're not planning on having kids, get a vasectomy. That's the note I'd like to close on. Thank you so much, Ty, for coming on and talking to me. I really appreciate it.